this is the story of little Queenie. Once upon a time, when your mothers were as small as you, there lived a little girl called Queenie. She was an odd little girl. She never cried, she never grumbled, she never complained about anything. Well, that sounds as if she was very good, doesn't it? Yet nobody liked her. "Queenie's strange," said John, who lived next door. "She never feels sorry for anyone. When I fell off the garden wall the other day and made my head bleed, Queenie just stood and stared at me. It was Elsie who rushed up and helped me." "And you know that poor blind man who stands at the corner of the main road, don't you?" said Katy. "Well, we've all given him a penny at times, but Queenie told me she never had. And when I said, 'But aren't you sorry he's blind? Don't you want to help him?' she said, no, she didn't. She is strange." "The other day I went to tea with her," said Lenny. "Her mother had a dreadful headache, so I thought we'd play a game that didn't make much noise. But Queenie shouted and laughed as loudly as anything. And she's got such a nice, kind mother. I think there's something the matter with Queenie." "It's what I said," said John. "She's never sorry for anyone. She's not warm-hearted. She's pretty and clever and neat and good at games, but you just can't like her." Now one day, Queenie's grandmother came to see her. The poor old lady had fallen down the stairs the day before and had hurt her knee, so she could only just hobble along with a stick. But did Queenie rush to get her a chair, or put her a footstool for her bad leg to rest on? Did she kiss her kind old granny and say she was sorry about her leg? No, she didn't. She let her mother get the chair and the footstool. Her granny looked at her, then spoke to her mother. "There's something wrong with Queenie. She's never sorry for anyone, so she's never kind. I think there must be something wrong with her heart. She's cold-hearted. That's the most terrible thing to be, because she'll never know what it is to be really happy. You must have a warm heart to be happy." Queenie thought her granny was silly. "I am happy," she said. "And why should I be sorry for people? I'm never sorry for myself." "Oh, you've no need to be," said her granny impatiently. "You're pretty and clever. You have nice clothes and good food to eat. You have a kind father and mother and plenty of toys. You've no cause to be sorry for yourself. But because you're such a lucky little girl, you should be grateful and try to feel sorry for those who are not so well off, and who may be very ill or unhappy." "You're always preaching, Granny," said Queenie rather crossly. Her mother was worried to hear what Granny said, and she made up her mind to take Queenie to the doctor. So the next day she set off with Queenie. The little girl didn't want to go, and she hung behind all the way. But at last they were there, and the wise old doctor was looking at the little girl. He listened to her heart. He felt all round it. He tapped it. He stroked the skin over it. Then he shook his head. "Seems all right," he said. "And yet there's certainly something wrong with it. Ring her again soon, and I'll try and find out what's the matter. Most extraordinary." Queenie's mother was upset and frightened to hear what the doctor said. As they went through the woods on their way home, she cried, and tears ran down her cheeks. Queenie saw them, but she didn't bother to comfort her mother. Soon they met a small, bent old woman who lived all by herself in the wood. Everyone thought she must be more than 100 years old. She stopped when she saw Queenie's mother crying and asked her what was the matter. "There's something wrong with my little Queenie's heart," said the little girl's mother. "But the doctor doesn't know what it is."
"Well, maybe I can find out," said the little woman. "There's many a queer spell I know to put hearts right. I'll have a little look at Queenie's."
"You can't. It's inside me," said Queenie. But the old woman laughed and clapped Queenie so hard on the back that her heart fell out of her body and landed on the grass beside the old woman. It was the queerest thing you ever saw. The old lady bent down and picked up the heart. She shook her head solemnly and showed it to Queenie's surprised mother.
"Look there. Her heart is of stone. Feel it. It's hard and cold. Do you wonder the child can't feel sorry for anyone and can't do a kindness? Who could, with a cold, hard, stony heart like that? It's the worst heart I've ever seen in my life, and I've looked into a good many. Here you are. Take it back, little girl. You'll never be happy till you melt that stony heart of yours."
"But how can she?" asked the mother, frightened and sad.
"Only one way,"
said the old woman, hobbling off.
"Only one way. Be kind, even if you don't feel like it. There's nothing like kindness to melt a heart to stone."
"Oh, Queenie, you must try and do what the old woman says," said her mother. "I do want people to love you as they love other children. Please, will you try to be kind and see if your heart gets better?"
"Well, I'll try," said Queenie, thinking the whole thing was a fuss and a bother. "I really will try. I didn't very much like the look of my heart, I must say. You know, Mother, it has felt very heavy lately. And of course if it's made of stone, that's the reason."
"Well, you have no idea how hard it is to be kind if you don't feel as if you want to be." Poor Queenie. It was difficult for her to say nice things to people and to try and comfort them when things went wrong. But because she didn't want her heart to feel heavier and heavier, she tried. "When children fall down, I must pick them up," she planned. "When they get into trouble over their lessons, I must help them. When Mother has a headache, I must be quiet. Oh, it's easy enough for the other children to do these things because they want to do them, but I don't. Still, I will." So she did. She had plenty of chances for kindness that week. Joan, who lived opposite, broke her leg, and Queenie went across to see her. She took her one of her own dolls, and she read to Joan for half an hour from a book. She didn't want to one bit, of course. It bored her very much. At the end of her visit, when she rose to go, Joan pulled her down to the couch and kissed her. "Oh, I never knew you could be so sweet and kind, Queenie," she said. "I love the doll, and you do read so nicely. Please come again." Queenie suddenly felt a curious pain in her heart, and she put her hand there. She felt pleased with Joan's words, but she wished her heart wouldn't hurt her so much. It would be too bad if it began to pain her just as she was trying hard to cure it. The next day she went to see her granny, and she rode in the bus. It was very full, and Queenie could only just find herself a seat. As she sat down, she noticed an old man getting on the bus. There was no room for him at all. He would have to stand. Queenie would have let him stand in the ordinary way, but now she was trying to remember to be kind. So up she got at once. "Please, have my seat," she said. and the old fellow sat down.
"Now there's a kind little girl for you," he said,
in such a loud voice that everyone heard. They stared at Queenie and gave her warm smiles. She felt that funny pain round her heart again and pressed it hard. Oh dear, it really did hurt. She went into her granny's house. "How's your poor leg, Granny?" she said. "Don't get up to get tea. I'll get it for you, and I'll make you some toast too." Queenie had planned all this on the bus. Her granny was most astonished. She sat and watched the little girl getting tea.
"Well, you always were a pretty child, Queenie," she said at last. "But now you've a bit of kindness in your eyes. You look a real darling. It is a pleasure to have you with me."
Queenie's heart hurt her again, but she didn't say a word. No, she'd always boasted that she never felt sorry for herself, so she wouldn't complain. A week or two went by. Queenie did every little kindness she could. She gave the old blind man a whole 10p instead of buying a new chair for her doll's house. She took Mrs. Brown's baby out in the pram for her each day because Mrs. Brown was so busy with the spring cleaning. She brought in a poor, half-starved little cat and asked her mother if she could feed it and keep it for her own. It was the first time she'd ever wanted a pet. She began to look happy, although her heart gave her a lot of pain. She smiled a score of times in an hour. She laughed more than she'd ever done. Her eyes were bright and shone with a kindness that no one had seen there before. "Queenie, I can't help feeling proud of you," said her mother. "You really do try very hard indeed to be kind. Do you still find it very difficult?" Queenie thought hard, and a surprised look came into her eyes. "No," she said, "it isn't as hard at all now. I don't have to try to be kind, Mother. I want to be. I can't help being. I don't have to think to myself, 'Look, Katie's fallen down, it's your duty to go and help her.' I just rush to her without thinking, because I can't bear to see her crying." "I'm so glad," said her mother. "Your heart must be quite better now." "Oh, Mother, it isn't," said poor Queenie, pressing her hand to it. "It's much worse. It gives me such a lot of pain. Sometimes I can't bear it." "Poor child," said her mother in alarm. "We'll go at once to that old woman who lives in the wood. Maybe she can do something. We'll go now." So they went, and came to the old dame's little hidden-away cottage. She was in, and very pleased to see them. "Queenie really has been trying to be kind," explained the little girl's mother. "But I'm afraid her heart is worse. It hurts her very much."
Let's feel it,"
said the old woman, and she put her hand into Queenie's frock. She felt round about where her heart was. Then she laughed and laughed.
"Oh, there's nothing wrong," she said. "Nothing at all. It's a different heart entirely. It's warm and soft. You feel it yourself, madam. Nothing like the cold heart of stone she had before. It's a lovely heart to have. She should be proud of it now, for a warm heart like that will bring her great happiness. Look at her face. It's sweet and kind now."
"But why does her heart hurt her?" asked the little girl's mother.
"Oh, it won't any more,"
said the old dame.
"You see, it's as I said. Kindness melted that heart of stone, and the melting was painful. But now it's quite all right. She needn't worry any more."
Queenie was very happy to hear that. She went off with her mother, skipping along. Now she's grown up, and I know perfectly well that her heart is as warm and kind as anyone else's. You should see how the children love her. She told me this story to tell to you, and she says, always have a warm heart, and you'll be as happy as the day is long. And here's a story about the house in the fog. There was once a boy who didn't believe in fairies, or pixies, or giants, or dragons, or magic, or anything like that at all. "But at least you know there were dragons," said Mary Jane. "St. George killed one. It's even in our history books at school, where it tells us why we have St. George's cross on our flag." "Believe what you like," said William. "I just don't think there were ever such things." Now one day, William had to go to a cub meeting. He was a very good cub indeed, and meant to be an even better scout later on. He had his tea at home, and then looked at the clock. "I must go, Mother," he said. "I've got to be at the meeting at 6. His mother peered out of the window. It was a dark evening, and, dear me, how foggy it seemed too. "I wonder if you ought to go, William," she said. "It's getting foggy." "Oh, Mother, what does that matter?" said William, putting on his cub jersey. "I know my way blindfold. I can't possibly miss my way home." Well, William was certainly a very sensible boy, so his mother let him go. He got to the meeting in good time. William was always punctual, and he had a very nice evening. Then it was time to go home. The cub master looked out of the door. "My word," he said, "the fog's a bit thick. I hope you'll find your way home all right." "Well, we all go the same way, except William," said John, "so we can keep together. What about William, though?" said William. "Do you suppose I'd lose my way in a fog? A cub knows his way about, even if he can't see a thing." And off he went into the fog alone. Didn't he know his way perfectly well? Hadn't he walked the same road dozens of times? What did it matter if the fog was thick? He could easily find his way home. But after he turned 2 corners, he suddenly stopped. His torch hardly showed a beam at all in the thick fog. Was he in the right road? He must be. He couldn't possibly have taken the wrong turning. He flashed his torch on the name of the road, printed on a wall nearby. Ah, yes, he was all right. It was Ash Tree Avenue. Thank goodness. He hadn't gone the wrong way after all. "I've only to go down to the end of the road, turn sharply to the left, cross over, and then keep straight on till I get to my own house," said William to himself. So off he went again, his steps tap-tapping in the fog, which now swirled thickly about him. He went on and on. Wherever was the end of Ash Tree Avenue? Surely it wasn't as long as this. On and on and on. William stopped, puzzled. He ought to have come to the end of it by now, and have turned left. He turned and went back. "I'll start at the top again, where the name of the road is," he thought. His steps tap-tapped again as he went. On and on and on he walked. He didn't come to the beginning of the road, where he'd seen the name. Where was it? He'd kept on the very same pavement, and he hadn't crossed over at all. It must still be Ash Tree Avenue. But why didn't it end? He stopped again. He turned and went down the road this time. Surely he'd come to the turning. On he went, but there really was no turning. What had happened? "I'm not in a dream. I know that," said William. "I've just come from the cub meeting, and I'm walking home in rather a thick fog, and I'm on the right way. I'm not lost. I just can't seem to find the end of this road." It was no use. He couldn't find it. No matter if he went up or down, there seemed no end and no beginning. "This is absolutely silly," said William at last. "There's no sense in it. I shall go into one of these houses and ask my way." He flashed his torch on the gate of the nearest house. He saw the name there, Munty House.
When the music stops, turn your cassette over.
He went up the little path and came to the front door. It had a peculiar knocker in the shape of a man's head. The head had pointed ears and a wide grin. William knocked on the door with it. The door opened, and a dim light shone out from the hall. "Please," began William, "could you tell me—" Then he stopped. Nobody was there. There was just the open door and the dark hall, and nothing else. How peculiar. William peered inside. A curious whistling noise came up the hall, like the wind makes in the chimney. "Well," said William, "if someone's whistling, someone's at home. I'll go in." So in he went, and the door shut softly behind him. He walked up the hall and came to a room without a door. Someone was whistling there. The whistling stopped.
"Come in! Come in!"
said a high little voice.
"What do you want, William?"
William jumped. How did anyone in that house know his name? He looked round the room in surprise. A plump little man with pointed ears and remarkably green eyes was sitting in a rocking chair by an enormous fire. "Rockety-rock," he went, "rockety-rock." He looked at William and grinned.
"Why," said William, "you're exactly like the knocker on your door." "I know," said the little man. "Why shouldn't I be? Your name's William, isn't it? I'm Mr. Munty, of Munty House."
"How do you know my name's William?" asked William.
"Well, I just took one look at you, and I knew your name must be William,"
said Mr. Munty, rocking furiously.
"That's easy."
It didn't seem easy to William. He stared at Mr. Munty, who stared back. "I came to ask if you could, began William, but he was interrupted by a large black cat with eyes as green as Mr. Munty's.
"Meow,"
said the cat, walking into the room and patting Mr. Munty on the knee.
"Meow." "Hungry, are you?"
said Mr. Munty.
"Poor jug. Poor."
There was a milk jug on the table, and on the floor below a large saucer. The jug solemnly tipped itself and poured milk into the saucer below.
"Good jug, good,"
said Mr. Munty, rocking away hard.
"You didn't spill a drop that time. You're getting better."
William stared in surprise. What a peculiar jug. He looked at Mr. Munty. "I say," he said, "are you a conjurer?"
"No," said Mr. Munty. "Are you?"
"No," said William. "I'm a little boy."
"Don't believe in them,"
said Mr. Munty. and he gave a sudden high chuckle like a blackbird.
I never did believe in little boys.
William was astonished.
But you must believe in them, he said. I've just been to a cub meeting. I'm a cub, and I... There you are, said Mr. Munty, grinning. You're a cub. You're not a little boy. What sort of a cub are you? I believe you're a fox cub. You've got such a nice bushy tail.
William felt something swishing behind him and looked round. To his enormous astonishment, he saw that a fine bushy tail hung down behind him. He turned round to see it properly, and the tail turned with him. He felt it. Good gracious! It seemed to be growing on him, right through his shorts.
Meow,
said the cat again, and patted the little man on the knees.
What? Still hungry?
Said Mr. Munty.
Oh, I never knew such a cat. There's a kipper in the cupboard for you.
The cat went to the cupboard door, stood on his hind legs, and opened it. He sniffed inside the cupboard, put in his paw, and pulled out a kipper. It landed on the floor.
Shut the door, Greenie! Shut it!
Ordered Mr. Munty. The cat blinked at him with deep green eyes and carefully shut the cupboard door. Then he began to eat his kipper. William stared, open-mouthed, forgetting his tail for the moment. What a very clever cat!
Well,
said Mr. Munty, rocking away hard.
Did you say you were a fox cub? Oh, perhaps you're a bear cub. I see you have nice hairy paws.
William looked at his hands in horror. What was the matter with him? He had big hairy paws now instead of hands. He hid them in his pockets, full of dismay. What was happening? What was this little man with the bright green eyes?
No, on the whole, I think you must be a lion cub,
said Mr. Munty, peering at him.
I never in my life have seen such wonderful whiskers. Magnificent. Aren't they, Greenie? Even better than yours. Meow,
said Greenie, and began washing himself very thoroughly. William felt his face in alarm. Goodness gracious! There were long, strong whiskers growing from his cheeks. How very peculiar he must look. His paw brushed against his face, a furry, soft, paddy paw, just like a bear's. "Please, sir," said William, beginning to feel scared, "I want to go home. I'm not a lion cub, or a bear cub, or a fox cub. I'm a little boy cub, a sort of scout."
I told you I didn't believe in little boys,
said Mr. Munty.
So I don't believe in your home either. I don't believe you want to go there because there isn't one, and I don't believe in you. Do you believe in me?
"Well, what are you?" asked William desperately.
My mother was a pixie, and my father was a brownie,
said Mr. Munty, rocking away. "Then I don't believe in you," said poor William. "I don't believe in fairies, or pixies, or brownies, or dragons, or giants, or—"
"And I don't believe in little boys, so we're quits,"
said Mr. Munty, with a wide grin. "Ding dong," said the clock loudly, and danced all the way down to the end of the mantelpiece and back again.
"Will you stop that?"
said Mr. Munty, fiercely to the clock.
"How often must I tell you that well-behaved clocks don't caper about like that?"
William began to feel bewildered. His tail waved about behind him. He could feel it quite well. His hairy paws were deep in his pockets. He could feel the whiskers on his cheeks. What was happening? He didn't believe in any of it, but it was happening all right, and happening to him. "I'm going out of this peculiar house," said William suddenly, and he turned to go.
"You might say goodbye,"
said Mr. Munty, rocking tremendously hard and almost tipping over. "Goodbye, Mr. Munty," said William.
"Meow,"
said the cat, and came with him to the front door. The cat stood up and opened the door politely. William went out into the darkness and the fog, the door shut. He shone his torch on the knocker-head, and then on the name of the house on the front gate. Munty House. Who was Mr. Munty? Could he be a conjurer? Conjurers did do peculiar things. But that cat, too, and the jug, and the clock. "I shall certainly come back tomorrow and see Mr. Munty again in the daylight," said William to himself. He went down the road, hoping that he would find the end of it this time, and to his great delight he did. The fog began to clear a little, and he could see his way. "Turn to the left, then over the crossing, and straight home," said William in delight. "Oh dear, what in the world will Mother say when I arrive home with a tail and furry paws and whiskers?" She didn't say anything, because when William thankfully walked in, his tail had gone. His hands were his own again, and there were no whiskers left. And, what was more, his mother wouldn't believe a word of his tale. "Fancy you making up such a silly story," she said. "You're very late, William, and you needn't tell me a lot of fairy tales like that. Just tell the truth." Now, the next day, as you can imagine, William went off to Ash Tree Avenue to look for Munty House, and the queer knocker on the door, and Mr. Munty himself. And will you believe it, though he looked at every single house in the avenue at least 3 times, not one was called Munty House, and not one had a knocker in the shape of a grinning head. Poor William was terribly puzzled. He told his story to several people, but nobody believed him at all. "How can you make up such a story when you've always said you don't believe in things like that?" said Mary Jane. "He told it to me. That's how I know about it. I've no tail left, of course," said William. "But see, there are a few little hairs still on my hands, and there's a place here on my left cheek that feels a bit like a whisker growing. Do tell me what you think about it, please." "Well, I don't know what to think. What do you think about it all?" I'm sure you've all been to the circus. Well, here's a story about an elephant. It's called Look Out for the Elephant. "There's an elephant loose," shouted Jim, rushing into the school playground. "I just heard a man say so. It escaped from the circus." "Where is it? Where is it?" cried all the children, rushing round Jim. "It's in the park, and they're afraid it'll trample down all the lovely flowers," said Jim. "Oh, what a shame," said Sarah. She loved flowers, and she couldn't bear to think of the elephant's great foot trampling and breaking them all. "They've sent for men with sticks," said Jim. "They'll scare that bad elephant properly. I wouldn't mind chasing him myself." "But elephants are nice," said Sarah. "I rode on one heaps of times at the zoo. They're gentle and kind. They can't help being big and having enormous feet. I think it's horrid to send for men with sticks." "All right, then. You go and get that elephant out of the park," said Jim scornfully. "Go on. See if it will come and eat out of your hand and follow you like a dog. I tell you, big sticks are the only thing to frighten an elephant." Sarah stood, listening to Jim. She was just about to tell him that an elephant had eaten out of her hand at the zoo when she'd given him a bun, and then a grand idea came into her head. Now, when Sarah had an idea, she always acted on it at once. So she turned and ran into the school. She went to where the 11 o'clock buns and milk were set ready for the children, and she put 12 of the buns into her school satchel. You can guess what her idea was now, can't you? Well, whoever would think of such a thing? Only Sarah. She ran out of the school gate and made for the park. It wasn't very far away. There was a place in the hedge she could get through. She squeezed through it, and there she was in the park. Where was the elephant? Well, he wasn't very difficult to see, as you can imagine. There he stood, waving his enormous trunk to and fro, his great feet very near to a big bed of glorious dahlias. In the distance, Sarah could hear shouting, and she guessed that men were coming with sticks. "They'll only scare him, and he'll go galloping over the dahlias," thought Sarah. "I'd better hurry." So she trotted down the path to where the big elephant stood. She went right up to him. "You're awfully like the elephant who gave me rides at the zoo," she told him, and he looked down at her out of little twinkling eyes. He flapped his ears and made a little trumpeting noise. "Are you asking for a bun?" said Sarah, and she put her hand in her satchel. "Well, here's one." The elephant put out his trunk and took the bun. He swung his trunk up to his big mouth, and the bun was gone. He held out his trunk for another. "Well, you can have all my buns if you come quietly down this path with me," said Sarah, "away from those lovely flower beds. Your feet are so big, you know. Here you are. Here's another bun." She gave him another, and then began to walk down the path to the park gate. The elephant, seeing that she had plenty more buns, followed her closely, trying to put his trunk inside the satchel. Sarah laughed. "Oh, you wait till I give you one. There you are. Now, do come along. We'll soon be at the gate." Well. The men with sticks stopped at once when they saw the elephant following little Sarah like a dog. "Look at that," they said. "That kid has got old Jumbo eating out of her hand. Send his keeper to that park gate. That will be the place to capture the elephant. He's not scared any more, or angry. Well, would you believe it?" Jumbo followed Sarah all the way to the gate, eating the buns she gave him. And there, at the gate, was the elephant's keeper waiting for him. Jumbo was very glad indeed to see him. He loved his keeper. "Thank you, little girl," said the keeper gratefully. "If it hadn't been for you, poor old Jumbo would have been sent racing all over the flower beds in fright. He might have done a lot of damage. Now, is there any reward you'd like for getting him to come quietly?" "Well," said Sarah, I suppose I couldn't ride on his head, could I? Right past our school? The children would hardly believe it if they saw me there." "Yes. Old Jumbo will set you on his head and hold you there with his trunk," said the keeper with a laugh. "Up, Jumbo, up!" Jumbo picked up Sarah very gently and set her on his big head. Then, holding her there with his trunk, he set off down the road that led past the school, swaying this way and that. "Look! Look! It's Sarah up there!" shouted the children. "Hurrah for Sarah! Sarah, how did you get there?" "Oh, Sarah," It was a lovely reward, wasn't it? She deserved it, because she really did have a very good idea.